The year was 1992. Michael Jackson stood at the window of his sprawling Neverland Ranch, staring out at the rolling hills of Santa Barbara County. For 15 years, this had been his sanctuary, his escape from a world that both worshipped and hunted him. But on this particular night, something changed. A file had arrived at his doorstep. Inside were details that would shatter any illusion of safety he had left. The FBI had begun monitoring Jackson that year, investigating death threats against him made by a man obsessed with his sister Janet. What Michael read in those pages, what he discovered about the people circling his life like vultures, would mark the beginning of a terrifying realization. The most famous man in the world had nowhere to hide. And the worst part? The danger wasn't just coming from strangers. It was coming from people he trusted. This is the story the world was never meant to hear. The story of how Michael Jackson discovered that fame wasn't S.H.I.E.L.D. It was a target painted on his back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Michael Jackson. When Michael Jackson first purchased the 2,700-acre property nestled among the Golden Hills north of Los Olivos, he believed he had finally found peace. From 1988 to 2005, Neverland Ranch would serve as his home and private amusement park. The property was initially shrouded in secrecy. It was purchased by a trust with Jackson's lawyer, John Branca, and his accountant as trustees for reasons of privacy. Michael understood, even then, that his fame required layers of protection. Walls, gates, distance. He named it Neverland, after the fictional island in Peter Pan where children never grew old. For Michael, who had spent his childhood performing in smoky nightclubs while other boys played Little League, the name held profound meaning. This would be the childhood he never had, a place of wonder, a place of safety. It became his private amusement park, with numerous artistic garden statues, amusement rides, and a petting zoo. There was a Ferris wheel, carousel, zipper, octopus, pirate ship, wave swinger, super slide, roller coaster, bumper cars, and an amusement arcade. But even as he built his paradise, Michael took precautions that revealed a darker awareness. The master closet contained a secret safe room for security. Late at night, when the carousel lights dimmed and the animals in the zoo settled into sleep, Michael would sometimes walk the grounds alone. The silence should have been comforting. Instead, it amplified every sound, every rustle in the bushes, every creak of the old oak trees. He told very few people about the fear that lived inside him, the fear that followed him since childhood, planted by his father's heavy hand and watered by decades of public scrutiny. The fear that whispered, "You can never let your guard down. You can never truly rest." In those early Neverland years, Michael tried to ignore the whisper. He filled his days with music, with laughter, with the joy of children experiencing magic for the first time. Neverland became a fairy tale shrined innocence, where young guests passed the hours listening to music from Disney films, darting from one carnival ride to the next. But the whisper never stopped, and soon it would become a scream. Because what Michael didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the very sanctuary he had built was being watched, studied, and soon it would be violated in ways that would destroy him. The question wasn't if his world would come crashing down. It was when. The Jackson family compound in Encino had always felt like neutral ground. It was where Michael could visit his mother, Catherine, without the elaborate security measures of Neverland. It was supposed to be safe. It wasn't. Frank Paul Jones sent death threats against Jackson, writing, "I will personally attempt to kill if he doesn't pay me my money." Jones was arrested for trespassing on June 22, 1992, at the Jackson family compound in Encino, California. When Michael received the news of the arrest, something shifted inside him. This wasn't a theoretical threat. This was a man who had physically come to his family's home, a man who wanted him dead. The FBI files would later reveal the full scope of Jones's obsession. Part 6 of the FBI files covers 199 pages of death threats and extortion attempts that happened throughout Jackson's life. Michael began sleeping with the lights on. He started varying his routes when traveling. He hired additional security. But no matter how many precautions he took, the fundamental truth remained. His fame made him visible, and visibility made him vulnerable. What haunted Michael most wasn't the stranger who had been arrested at his family's gate. It was the realization that there were others, that there would always be others, that the very thing that had given him everything, his talent, his fame, his connection with millions of people, was also the thing that put a permanent target on his back. The death threats were important because questions about why Jackson took certain security measures have been asked, and even turned against him in a sinister manner. As 1992 drew to a close, Michael found himself questioning everyone, the new faces on his staff, the photographers who seemed to know his schedule, the fans who showed up at locations they shouldn't have known about. He confided in Elizabeth Taylor during a late-night phone call. "I don't know who to trust anymore," he told her. "I look at people and I wonder, are they here because they love me or because they want something from me?" Elizabeth, who had weathered her own storms of fame, offered what comfort she could, but she knew the truth as well as Michael did. In their world, paranoia wasn't a mental illness. It was a survival instinct. And Michael was about to need every ounce of that instinct, because 1993 was coming, and with it, a nightmare that would make death threats seem almost merciful by comparison. The Dangerous World Tour was supposed to be a triumph. Night after night, Michael took the stage before tens of thousands of screaming fans, delivering performances that defied human limitation. He was at the peak of his powers, his body an instrument of impossible grace, his voice carrying emotions that transcended language. But behind the curtain, Michael was falling apart. In August 1993, as the second leg of Jackson's Dangerous World Tour began, news of the allegations broke and received worldwide media attention. The accusations came like a bomb detonating in the middle of his life. Suddenly, the man who had been beloved by billions was being called a monster. The media frenzy was unlike anything the world had ever seen. His longtime makeup artist Karen Faye testified. Michael was under a lot of stress at that time because that's when the first child allegations were made public. Michael had to go on stage every night, knowing that the whole world thought he was a pedophile. He had to stand up in front of all these audiences with the physical pain that he had, and knowing that everybody in that audience is thinking that he was the vilest pedophile on earth. Imagine the courage that required. Imagine standing in that spotlight, hearing the cheers, and wondering if they would turn to jeers. Wondering if this would be the night the crowd turned on him, the night they threw things, the night they rushed the stage. In August 1993, 2 shows of Jackson's Dangerous World Tour in Thailand had to be canceled due to dehydration. The official reason was physical exhaustion. The real reason was that Michael's body was betraying the war being waged inside his mind. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. Jackson had trouble sleeping on tour. He was so buzzed by his own adrenaline, after a show it would take him 24 hours to relax his body, and sometimes it would take 2 days to be able to sleep. The world was watching him, judging him, and he had nowhere to hide. Lisa Marie Presley had been reconnected with Michael through a mutual friend in November 1992, and they talked almost every day by telephone. As the abuse accusations became public, he became dependent on Presley for emotional support. She was concerned about his faltering health. In late-night phone calls, Michael would break down. "They're trying to destroy me," he told her. "They want everything I've built to crumble, and I don't know how to fight back." Lisa Marie listened. She loved him, but even she couldn't protect him from what was coming, because Michael was about to learn the cruelest lesson of fame. When the world turns against you, even the truth isn't enough to save you. By autumn, Michael was a ghost of himself. In November 1993, Jackson announced that he was dependent on painkillers. He said he had recently undergone a scalp surgery, and the painkillers had been prescribed. The painkillers weren't just for physical pain. They were his only escape from the relentless psychological torture of watching his reputation be dismantled piece by piece. Every day brought new headlines, new accusations, new betrayals. Jackson's lawyer Bertram Fields announced that his client would be treated for painkillers outside the U.S. He said he's not in a position to cooperate with his attorneys now preparing his defense. He was barely able to function on an intellectual level. The media had a field day. When Jackson left the U.S. to go into drug rehabilitation, the Daily Mirror held a Spot the Jacko contest, offering readers a trip to Disney World if they could correctly predict where he would appear next. Headlines read, "Drug treatment star faces life on the run." They treated him like a criminal, like prey to be hunted. Geraldo Rivera set up a mock trial with a jury made up of audience members, even though Jackson had not been charged with crime. Michael watched from his treatment facility as the circus continued without him. He saw former employees selling stories. He saw supposed friends revealing private details for a paycheck. He saw the machinery of fame, the same machinery that had once lifted him to the heavens, now grinding him into dust. But here's what the world didn't see. A poll at the time, conducted by Current Affair, found that nearly 75% of Americans believed Jackson was telling the truth. 75%. 3 out of 4 Americans believed him. And yet, the headlines kept coming. The jokes kept spreading. The damage kept accumulating. Michael learned something essential in those dark months. Public opinion doesn't matter when the narrative has been set. Truth doesn't matter when lies are more entertaining. Innocence doesn't matter when guilt makes a better story. In November 1993, Jackson announced the cancellation of the remaining shows of the Dangerous World Tour due to dependence on painkillers. For the first time in his adult life, Michael Jackson had been forced off the stage, and in the silence that followed, he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The settlement was never about guilt. Michael's lawyers made that abundantly clear to anyone who would listen. Jackson denied wrongdoing repeatedly, including a televised statement at his Neverland Ranch in December 1993. But the world didn't want to hear explanations. The world wanted a villain. The civil case was settled out of court for a reported multi-million-dollar sum in 1994. When the news broke, Michael knew what people would think. He knew the settlement would be interpreted as an admission of guilt, no matter how loudly his lawyers protested otherwise. "They're not giving me a choice," he told his inner circle. "If I fight this in civil court while the criminal investigation is ongoing, everything I say can be used against me. They've designed a system where I can't win. The only way to survive is to make it stop, to make all of it stop." The 1993 investigation did not result in criminal charges being filed against Jackson from that initial probe. According to the FBI files, the FBI found no evidence of criminal conduct on Jackson's part. No evidence, no charges, no criminal case. But none of that mattered. The damage was done. What the public never understood was that Michael didn't settle because he was guilty. He settled because he was dying inside, day by day, under the weight of persecution that showed no signs of ending. His security team revealed what those months had done to him. One bodyguard observed, "What Mr. Jackson was really paranoid about, the thing he felt he needed most from us, was protection from the people who were already in his life. He wanted us there so he could hide his movements from his own lawyers and managers." Think about that. Michael Jackson, surrounded by an army of employees, felt he couldn't trust the people paid to protect him. His lawyers, his managers, the very people who should have been his allies. The settlement bought him time. It bought him space. But it cost him something that could never be recovered: his sense of safety, his belief in human goodness, his faith that truth would eventually prevail. From that moment forward, Michael Jackson would never feel safe again. Not in his own home. Not among his own family. Not even in his own skin. The walls he built would only grow higher, and the loneliness inside those walls would slowly consume him. In the years that followed, Michael transformed from a man who sought connection into a man who sought isolation. Surveillance equipment covered every inch of his property. Panic buttons were installed, and armed guards patrolled the grounds. But Michael was so paranoid, he still went from door to door checking locks. The world saw a recluse. They saw eccentricity. What they didn't see was a man try to construct an impenetrable shield around himself and his children. When Jackson put masks on his children's faces to avoid having their identities known to the public, he called it dress up and turn it into a game, and the children were told not to use their real names. Critics mocked him. They called it bizarre. They called it evidence of mental instability. But Michael knew something those critics didn't. His children were the only pure thing left in his life. The only people who loved him without agenda. The only hearts he could trust completely. And he would do anything, to protect him from a machine that had nearly destroyed him. His bodyguards would later describe a superstar who had become trapped by his own success and was tormented by paranoia, loneliness, and isolation. But was it really paranoia if the threats were real? From 2004 onwards, Michael Jackson became very paranoid about his own life. The singer asked to wear a bulletproof vest during his trial because he feared that people would try to kill him. In 2005, he faced another trial, another circus. Santa Maria law enforcement contacted the FBI because they feared the trial could be a soft target for terrorism. Even law enforcement recognized that Michael Jackson's very presence created danger. His fame was so immense, his symbolism so powerful, that simply being in a courtroom with him was considered a security risk. On June 13, 2005, Jackson was acquitted of all charges. He should have felt relief. He should have felt vindication. Instead, he fell hollow, because Michael understood that acquittal didn't mean acceptance. It didn't mean the whispers would stop. It didn't mean he could ever return to the life he'd had before. Following the 2003 accusations, Jackson abandoned his estate, saying it had been violated. Neverland, the sanctuary he had built with such hope, such love, was dead to him now. Michael felt that Neverland was tainted. He would never sleep there again. After leaving America, Michael wandered Ireland, Bahrain, Europe. He was a king in exile, searching for a home that no longer existed. For the last 2.5 years of his life, bodyguards Bill Whitfield and Javon Beard were with Michael Jackson virtually 24 hours a day. They describe a sad, lonely figure who lived for his children. The man they protected was different from the performer the world remembered. He was gentle, thoughtful, devoted to his children in a way that surprised even those closest to him. "We worked for Mr. Jackson. We didn't work for the king of pop," says Bill. It was so good to see the side of him which was so in tune as a parent, from helping them with their homework and making sure they were eating right to putting them to bed. But underneath the tenderness was a current of fear that never stopped flowing. In his private diary, Jackson wrote, "I'm afraid someone will kill me. There are bad people everywhere. They want to destroy me and take control of my editorial. The system wants me to be killed for my music catalog." Some called it paranoia. But Michael had learned from brutal experience that the music industry was capable of anything. His catalog, the publishing rights to not only his own music, but to the Beatles' catalog as well, was worth billions. And there were people who would benefit enormously from his death. He continued to fear that people would kill him in order to get his music catalog and his publishing company. That is why he asked to wear a bulletproof vest on stage while performing during the This Is It concerts, because he feared that snipers would infiltrate into the audience in order to shoot him. In 2009, Michael agreed to a comeback tour, 50 concerts in London, a chance to remind the world of his genius, a chance, perhaps, to finally reclaim his narrative. But as rehearsals began, those closest to him saw the signs of man at the edge of his limits. In a series of emails to AEG Live executives, show director Kenny Ortega wrote Jackson was showing signs of paranoia, anxiety, and obsessive disorder-like behavior, and recommended a psychiatrist be brought in to evaluate the star. "It is like there are two people there," Ortega wrote. "One trying to hold on to what he was and still can be and not wanting us to quit him. The other in this weakened and troubled state." Two Michaels, the legend and the man, the invincible performer and the fragile human being. And time was running out for both of them. In the final weeks of his life, Michael Jackson carried the weight of impossible expectations. The comeback tour had sold out instantly, over 1 million tickets. The world was watching, waiting, desperate to see if the king of pop could still reign. His longtime makeup artist Karen Faye testified that Michael Jackson appeared paranoid, repeating himself and shivering from chills in his final days. "This was not the man I knew," she said. The insomnia that had plagued him for decades was now unbearable. After shows, Jackson was so buzzed by his own adrenaline, it would take him 24 hours to relax his body and sometimes 2 days to be able to sleep. As the tour dates got closer together, he would have trouble sleeping. It would start out okay, but it would get worse and worse. He needed rest. He needed peace. He needed, more than anything, to feel safe. According to accounts from his security team, Jackson had first connected with Dr. Conrad Murray when daughter Paris fell ill, not wanting to bring her to the hospital for fear of the paparazzi seeing them. Jackson requested a private physician. Even seeking medical care had become an act of secrecy. Even protecting his sick child required hiding from the cameras. This was Michael's reality, a reality where every normal human experience, seeing a doctor, taking a walk, attending your child's school event, was fraught with danger, where privacy didn't exist, where safety was an illusion. On June 23, 2009, something shifted. Jackson returned to rehearsals a very different man. I was overjoyed at his energy, his state of mind, his enthusiasm, Ortega testified. Those who saw him that night say he was luminous. The old magic was back. The moves, the voice, the presence that had made him a god among mortals, it all returned in a blaze of glory. It was, they would later realize, a goodbye. 2 days later, on June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson died of acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication after suffering cardiac arrest. He was 50 years old, and he had spent the last 16 years of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the danger he knew was coming. The world mourned Michael Jackson with a fervor that surprised even those who had loved him longest. Billions of people watched his memorial service. His music surged back to the top of the charts. The same media that had tormented him now eulogized him. And in the aftermath, a question lingered. Did we do this? Did we? With our insatiable appetite for scandal, our willingness to believe the worst, our treatment of celebrities as products rather than people, did we contribute to breaking this man? The truth is uncomfortable. Michael Jackson was never safe. Not from stalkers who wanted to kill him. Not from opportunists who wanted his money. Not from a media machine that fed on his pain. And not from a public that consumed his every moment, his every mistake, his every vulnerability. What happened to him later in life? The media bullying, the betrayal by trusted friends, and the media misrepresentation. These are things which damage the psyche, as they would any man. Michael wasn't paranoid. He was perceptive. He saw clearly what most of us refuse to acknowledge. That fame at his level isn't a blessing. It's a prison. A glass cage where the whole world watches you suffer. Despite having been deceased since 2009 and not residing at Neverland for 2 decades, the security surrounding Michael Jackson's ranch remains as if the king of pop were still alive. Even in death, Michael Jackson requires protection. Even in death, the fascination with him, the obsession, the need to possess some piece of his story, continues unabated. But perhaps that's the ultimate tragedy. We never let him rest while he was alive, and we haven't let him rest since he's been gone. Michael Jackson gave us everything. His childhood, his privacy, his health, his peace of mind. He gave us music that will echo through centuries, performances that defied the limits of human capability, and a vulnerability that made us feel like we knew him. But we didn't know him. We couldn't, because we never gave him the one thing he needed most, the space to simply be a man with fears, a man with hopes, a man who just wanted to feel safe. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who loves Michael Jackson. If this story inspired you, remember, even legends face battles unknown to the world. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves Michael Jackson. The story of Michael Jackson is not merely the narrative of an artist. It is a Greek tragedy written in real time, before the eyes of the entire world. There is no story in popular music as providential, and yet as tragic as the story of Michael Jackson, the unpayable price of a stolen childhood. From the very beginning, Michael paid a price no child should ever have to pay. His father, Joe Jackson, rehearsed him every day for at least 2 or 3 hours, and as Michael wrote his autobiography, Moonwalk, we would perform for him, and he would critique us. If you messed up, you got hit, sometimes with a belt, sometimes with a switch. Isolated from other children his age, Jackson spent his formative years either under the spotlight or rehearsing for it. What does this do to a soul? Michael and his brothers were frequently abused physically, verbally, and emotionally by their father, Joe. Most of these accounts come from Michael himself, who described his childhood as lonely and isolated. Imagine, While other children played ball in the park, Jackson spoke of the pain he felt watching other kids playing baseball and soccer in the park across the street while he was confined to recording studios. The Golden Prison. The rocky road to fame extracted a monumental toll, robbing critical experiences that young Michael would spend the rest of his life searching for, only to find mirages as he approached. Jackson described the feeling as being on a ride you cannot get off, saying, "I'm stuck, and I have to do this for the rest of my life. I'm under contract." Having signed that contract of fame before he was old enough to comprehend his control over him, these words break the heart. A 5-year-old child, selling his entire life for a dream he did not even understand. By the late 1980s, Jackson had become a prisoner of his own celebrity, the paradox of the world's most famous man. Michael Jackson's greatest paradox was this, as he himself confessed. "I hate to admit it, but I feel strange around everyday people. See, my whole life has been on stage, and the impression I give people is applause, standing ovations, and people running after you." He conquered the world, but lost the ability to exist within it. The relentless persecution. When Jackson released the album Thriller, he became one of the most recognized figures in the world. But with such fame came rumors of a bizarre lifestyle, followed by accusations. In 2005, Michael faced another trial for abuse charges. This time, he was acquitted of all charges, but the trial took a toll on his health, finances, and reputation. The acquittal did not heal the wounds. The world had already made its judgment. The legacy of pain transformed into art. Jackson lived vast lives within himself. That was where he ruminated and transformed his resentments and desires into art, both blessed and fierce. It is also where he found his strengths, and where he held his fragilities until they became lethal weaknesses. Given his upbringing, you can understand why he had to build this inner life. This is the true tragedy. A man who gave the world so much beauty, but never found peace. Michael Jackson's life was a mixture of extraordinary talent, groundbreaking achievements, and profound personal struggles. He revolutionized music, dance, and entertainment, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire millions around the world. Despite the controversies and difficulties he faced, his art and contributions to culture remain timeless. Michael Jackson did not die only on June 25, 2009. He died a little each day. Every time he was betrayed, every time he was ridiculed, every time he was forced to prove his innocence. As Jackson himself said, "I am just like anyone. I cut and I bleed, and I embarrass easily." Behind the legend, there was only a man wounded since childhood, desperately searching for the love and peace he could never have. He was, in the end, precisely what he claimed and fought to be, the greatest star in the world. But being the greatest star in the world has a price that no money can pay, and Michael Jackson paid that price with his life.